Hi, friends. This episode of Big Blue Banter is brought to you by Prize Picks. Head on over to Prize Picks and use promo code BANTER, and they'll match up to $100 on a new deposit. Thank you and enjoy.
Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneier, joined as always by my co-host Nick Filato, and I can't think of a better way that I wrapped up draft weekend, Nick, than today. Finally did it, Nick. Got out, no West, late afternoon tea time. Obviously, we've been working all weekend, and I finally did it, Nick. I finally shot under 100 on a golf course. No mulligans, no breakfast balls, no gimmies, putted it out, nothing. I had a 4-putt even in there. And on 17, Nick, was the first time I knew I was playing good, man. Like, this was the purest I ever hit my irons.
Triple bogey.
Yeah. Well, I triple bogeyed 18 and still shot the 99, which is insane. Triple bogeyed 18.
Dude, you probably got so pissed off, though, when you were triple
was
bogeyed on the last hole. Oh,
well, I
dude,
knew I had so much leg room. I'll tell you why in a second. So I had a 9 today on one hole. That sucked. I was in the sand, and I had 2 sand shots that didn't get out, and then I had to the third sand shot. You're just burning strokes. That was a 9. But I had 3 pars and a birdie today. And so that was really the difference in me breaking 100. But on 17 was when we finally first said, like, oh, shit, it could be happening. I had 90 through 16, and it was a par 3 on 17. So I just needed to bogey out to get under 100. And I hit a tee shot on 17. It was about 154 yards out. It drops on the green 10 feet from the hole. And I have a birdie putt 10 foot for the hole, and I sink it for a 2 on 17. Then I have so much leeway at that point because I'm at 92 with one more hole left, a par 4. But I still almost blew it. Had a nice drive, duffed the next shot.
Brother, this guy stinks.
Then I had 148 yards to the hole. Hit a 7-iron so pure. I hit my irons today as pure as I've hit it, that it actually landed pin high and bounced up top to the hill. Then I had like a long putt, miss. Another putt, miss. Then I had a 4-foot putt, shaking, missed. And then luckily, I had so much leeway that I could hit that 4th putt in for a 7, triple bogey, 99. The job is done, Nick. I've broken 100. It took me a year and a month to break 100. A year and a month, a little less than a month, about 12 and a half months to break 100.
I'm happy for you, man. Good for you. You know, I do, and like I give you shit for golf because golf is kind of boring, but I do appreciate somebody putting their mind to a task and accomplishing that task, especially when you've been under as much stress and as much work as you've been under recently covering the draft in the New York Giants.
Yeah, it's been a lot of work, and I knew this was going to be the day to blow it off. I didn't know this was going to be the day to do. I've been waiting. What's the day going to be? And the biggest difference today, Nick, it's so crazy. We're going to end it right here. No more golf talk, I promise. But the biggest difference for me today was I didn't think a lot. And that's what my brother always says. No swing thought, one swing thought, or just don't think. I didn't do all this whole thing where I'm trying to get my backswing perfect and the top of perfect. I just went up and I hit the freaking ball, dude, and it was way better that way. So next time I play, I'm going to try again to just not think about it. Don't think, just hit the freaking ball and concentrate on where the club is making contact with the actual golf ball. So it seems simple, but it's not, and that's golf.
Listeners, what do you think about this?
The golf clap.
They're very happy for you.
It sounds simple, but it's not. It's golf. But this is Big Blue Banter, and this is a New York Giants podcast, and we do this every year, Nick, on the Sunday after the draft, so it's a tradition that I love because you know what I love, and it's 30,000-foot view discussions about the Giants, where the roster's headed, and what they did. So this today is not going to be a draft review show where you're going to get grades from us. So this is an A+, this is a B-. Maybe we'll do that some point this week. I doubt it. We're not really a grade show. This is going to be an overview of the entire draft class with individual, breakdowns of players probably within, but a lot of 30,000-foot view stuff, just things that really define the class and define where the Giants are going. And so I have it set up, Nick, where I have 4 big questions I'm going to ask you. The first one I'm going to ask you is the overall question. Then I'm going to get to each day. But the first one I want to start with is, what direction are the Giants headed in going into year 3, coming out of the 2024 NFL draft? In your opinion, what direction is it? Where's the direction headed?
They're in ascending direction, but they're not necessarily in place right now to compete for Super Bowls. Now, if we go back to 2022, and this is what Joe Shane and Brian Dable would say, they would say, just last year, we won a playoff game. And then the following year, we lost our left tackle. We had all of these injuries. Daniel Jones only played in 6 games. He tore his ACL, and all of these realities that plagued the Giants. They really did happen. But I think we can also recognize that there are big question marks still on this roster. But if I had to come away and say, where are the New York Giants right now after the draft heading into the 2023 season, it's Daniel Jones. And I feel like this is the third or fourth year I'm saying this. If you're healthy enough to play, can you prove that you're worthy of almost $50 million to be on this roster after the 2024 season? That seems highly unlikely. The quarterback position still needs to be figured out. That's the biggest question mark heading in. And now, finally, because to speak to the Daniel Jones truthers, the Giants actually gave Daniel Jones a real number one threat, because we thought that happened in 2021 when we were all saying, well, you got Kenny Golladay, you got Kadarius Toney, but to the point of the Daniel Jones truthers, neither of those guys were ready to play football. Kenny Golladay had a shot hip. He was done. He was toasted. Kadarius Toney did not know how to read a playbook, unfortunately, and the Giants traded him just over a year after selecting him to the Kansas City Chiefs. So still, I have so many question marks about the quarterback position. I think the Giants, if everything goes right for them, like it did in 2022, a season where they were historically bad creating explosive plays, Dan, like historically bad. They had 28 explosive plays in 2022 passing, 28. The only team in the last 15 years to have less than that was the 2009 Cleveland Browns. Like that's what we're talking about. That's how
plays.
Passing plays. And it's not like they were having incredible rushing plays, 20 plus yards either. Saquon Barkley started off very hot.
Do you have the numbers by any chance on how many explosive plays they had, passing plays, not total?
44
last year. 44. So yes. 28 and 44. Do you by any chance know how many were Tyrod and DeVito or no?
I know 18 of them, I think, were on the back end of the season.
Okay.
But those 18 were all 20 plus air yards. So there were plays where DeVito and Tyrod Taylor, 5-10 yards, and then Darius Slayton made some yards after the catch. So I went to PFF and I checked, and Tommy DeVito and Tyrod Taylor had 18 plays of 20 plus yards or more air yards, though.
Okay.
So it's going to be more than 18.
Right.
And when you think about it, and I'm not sitting here just saying like, oh, Daniel Jones, like I've made my opinions of Daniel Jones very clear. I wouldn't even say they're opinions. I think it's just objective reality that he doesn't really challenge down the football field. Has he had the best situation around him? Absolutely not. It's very fair to say that, but still he's reluctant when he does have clean pockets to pull the trigger. It's just what happens on film. And there wasn't that many opportunities, Dan, but last season, like how many explosive plays did Daniel Jones have passing in the 6 games that he played in? He had the deep post to Hyatt to open the second half. And he wasn't in the best situation. I want to give him that, but still it wasn't there. And we had teams like the 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks sitting on all of those routes. It wasn't an explosive offense in 2022. And I think one of the themes of this draft was we're going to roll with Daniel Jones. We're not going with Drake May. We wanted to trade up. We explored it, but the Patriots wanted Drake May. So we're going to roll with Daniel Jones. We're going to roll with Drew Lock. And we're going to roll with Tommy DeVito at the quarterback position. We're going to put those 3 quarterbacks into a position where they have true explosive threats that can take a 6-yard pass and run it 20, 25, 40, 60 yards, whatever it is. And I think Tracy and Malik Neighbors obviously have that. Theo Johnson, he's more of a big seam threat, a big body over the middle of the field, who is also a good athlete. Again, I don't think he plays to that play speed. I'm not saying he's slow, but he tested like an incredible athlete, Dan.
Right.
So I hope I answered that question. I know I was a little bit long-winded, but do you have anything on that?
No, I like that answer. And I think the way I look at it, Nick, when I'm facing this question of what direction are the Giants headed in after the draft and after this offseason, we're going into year 3 of this GM. A lot of people are viewing this in a negative way. And I like to separate it right now, personally, quarterback and the team. And I'll tell you why. So I think, I know a lot of people disagree with this. I think it's very difficult to find quarterbacks in the NFL. And I think that a lot of teams are in just as bad, if not a worse position as the Giants as far as quarterback. I don't even necessarily I'm not so necessarily sure the Broncos are in a better position with Bo Nix, because I got to tell you something. You can sit there and tell me, like some people have told me this weekend on Twitter, Nick, that because the NFL GM took him at 12, that means the Giants are wrong, or you don't know if you're right, or, this is the decision where they went. Because I got a lot more people, Nick, who were at the Senior Bowl, boots on the ground, and they saw him throw at the Senior Bowl. And that didn't look like an NFL arm, and it didn't look like anywhere close to an NFL arm. And then you get to the actual games, and we'll see if it happens, because Sean Payton's a good coach. He's got his rapport with receiver. But when you don't have an NFL arm and you get to the actual games and it's noticeable at the Senior Bowl, it's more noticeable in the NFL games when the speed is up and the defenses are better, and even in the Senior Bowl. And the rate of like the actual windows are just not there. And I got other people boots on the ground at Senior Bowl who said Michael Penix didn't look like this all-star, gotta have him at 6 quarterback either. I didn't think he looked like that from a projection standpoint either. Now we move on, JJ McCarthy, right? And you're looking at all these guys, and I'm just not so sure that these teams have solved their problem at quarterback just because they took a quarterback. So I want to put quarterback aside right now because I feel like it was difficult. I don't really think Shane was in position to get a quarterback this offseason. I think the only quarterbacks that he felt like had a chance to be elite quarterbacks that were worth taking in the top of round one were the two at the top. I don't know how he felt about Daniels. We didn't really get much information on that, Nick. I feel like that was kind of settled. Washington was taking Daniels for a long time, so we don't have much. I know they brought him in, but we know they love Drake May. We know they loved Caleb Williams. And I had heard, I told you about this, Nick, 2 months ago from someone in that building. I'm not going to mention, but I can, without mentioning name, a player who said he knows that they love Drake May. He said he sees them watching Drake May a lot. They like Drake May. They tried to trade for Drake May. It couldn't happen. It didn't happen. So I don't really necessarily know when Shane could have got his quarterback last offseason either, Nick. I don't know when this opportunity was, and I don't think that's rare. I think a lot of GMs are in this position. So I like to separate it. And as far as where the rest of the roster is headed, I think we're headed in a direction where this team has reallocated assets, and they've given us a new plan. So the plan in the offensive line, as we're going to get to within this podcast, is a little bit different than it's been. It's not just throw a million darts in the top of your draft class at the offensive line position. It's bring in guys who have played offensive line in the NFL as your depth. Right? Like if we get to the season, everybody's going to be like, oh, we could have had this offensive lineman at 70 or 107. You throw those rookies in, man. And how many times we have to watch the same story play over again with Zudu and everybody before that, where they're a rookie. And now there's a stunt that's not picked up. And now the communication is not there. And now there's mental errors because they haven't played in the NFL. You put Aaron Stinney in. I know it's not a name people want to hear, but if you put him in, I'm not so sure those mental errors are happening. I'm not so sure we're blowing stunts and ruining drives. And you put in John Runyon, I'm not so sure he's going to be worse than whatever guard they could have taken at 47 over Tyler Nubin and stuck him right in there game one and said, you're the starter for game one. Illuminor, same thing on the other side. Obviously, people wanted offensive line, but I like this direction a little bit better, or I should say not just better, Nick. I'm willing to try something different here on the offensive line. Instead of just continuing to throw assets and draft picks, I'm willing to try a more veteran route.
I'm open to the veteran route, and I think you agree with this as well. It's not that you don't want them to select them, but there's an opportunity cost to selecting an offensive lineman, and the Giants needed to invest in their secondary. Look, Xavier McKinney and Saquon Barkley, the Giants had both of those guys. They were the faces of their respective sides of the football. They're no longer here. The Giants thought they were going to suck in 2022. This new regime thought they were going to suck, and then they would have blew up whatever plan they were going to have, but they decided to make the playoffs. Good for them. That was excellent. They won their first playoff game since the last time they won a Super Bowl. I absolutely love that, right? But that changed the course of what Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll wanted to do. It changed the course, so they paid Daniel Jones. They brought back Saquon Barkley. They got the band back together, and then they sucked the next year. And now they're readjusting again, and they're bringing in new faces of the franchise. And how many times did Shane mention, and he's done this so much, smart, tough, and dependable, and he is a culture setter. He was a culture setter at Minnesota. We love the feistiness. We love the toughness that this player played with. That's what they're looking for right now. And they wanted that in the secondary specifically. They went out and they got that in Brian Burns, who is going to be a tone setter as a pass rusher to complement Dexter Lawrence and Kayvon Thibodeau and Azeez Ojulari up front. They went out and got Bobby Okereke last offseason. So the defense is starting to round out, and now they just recognize, we're not fast on offense. Let's get our explosive playmakers on the offensive side of the football to allow our quarterback to have at least a chance to create explosive plays through not airing the football out 20 plus yards.
Yeah, you're right. And that was going to go into what I was going to say next, because I think it's hard to answer this question. It's a very loaded question, like what direction are they headed in? But I think part of it is they're headed in a direction where they're looking to add more explosion to this team. And they know that. What you said, Nick, what you broke down, they're not stupid. They understand that. They may not view it as JJ McCarthy's our solution for getting explosive whatever back, but they may view it as we put Brian Burns on this defensive line, and now we're a more explosive defensive line. If we put Malik Neighbors in this offense, we're in more explosive offense. We put Tyrone Tracy out there, and just like Brian Daboll said, and we'll get into that quote, he might be a kick returner, he might be used as a receiver, he may be used as a running back. We're not pigeonholing him into one role, and they're not saying you're this role, you're the running back. It's going to be traditional. You're going to simply get it out of the eye set, you're going to get a single back out of shotgun. There's going to be moving him around. There's going to be different ways to get him on the field with all the same goal, adding explosion to the offense. adding explosion to the defense as well with those players, because we know Tyler Nubin can come downhill. We know Tyler Nubin can break on a football as a robber or any role as a safety and try to make a play on that ball. We know the same thing with Drew Phillips. Yes, he's not great on the ball, but he is an explosive athlete who can come drive downhill in run support, on screens, all these different types of things. And so they added a lot of explosion. And I think that's kind of where they're trying to go because they needed it. What are you laughing at?
I hate myself so much. I don't know. Just keep going. No, because you were like, he's going to come
downhill.
He's going to come. He's going to drive downhill. And I'm just like, oh, damn it.
Your mind always goes to these places, Nick.
No, I'm just a child. I'm a 30.
You smile and then I can't help myself as well. But look, I think the direction is a more explosive team. You may look at it, and I know the skeptics are going to be like, oh, I don't believe the Giants are more explosive. They didn't add explosion because they didn't do anything at quarterback. I get it. The quarterback could hold this back. I'm not saying it's a guarantee. The offensive line, because they didn't invest there, could hold this back. I'm not saying that's a guarantee. But in their minds, with what they had to work with, they can't just sit on their hands and be like, we don't feel like we can get any great quarterback. Let's just do it. We don't really like the offensive lineman sitting at 47 and sitting at 6 and sitting at 70, but let's just do it. Let's just get O-line because we need to. No, you have to have the best player available at each time. Like, again, this is the key to these drafts that people seem to forget. Somebody said to me, or I got an argument about if this is a needs-based draft from Joe Schoen, which I do not think this was a needs-based draft personally, because I think if it was a needs-based draft, they would have taken offensive linemen, right? So, and I know, I get it, but you can't just draft for positions in this league. You have to understand that, like, it doesn't matter what the consensus big board or all this crap says. Like, nobody knows that this offensive lineman that wasn't picked there is going to be better than the player that was picked there instead of him, or it goes for any position. And I think that's something that to them, they had a theme in mind. Like you said, explosion, add it to this offense. We don't have a lot of it. It didn't just have to come at quarterback though. I think that's my main point there.
And we discussed this so much through the pre-draft process. The Giants, we love what they did in free agency because they put their offensive line in a place where they're not going to be desperate during draft day, right? Like if you love an offensive lineman and an offensive lineman falls, select him. I loved Cooper Beebe. Cooper Beebe had Tyrannosaurus Rex arms, and I think the Giants were a little bit scared off by that. I don't have the hubris to believe I know better than Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll when those guys have had hands-on, right? Like I like the tape, and that's about as far as I can go with understanding who these prospects are. And that's a huge part of the puzzle. But as we recognize, Joe Schoen also very much values culture and leadership traits and how are you going to fit in with what our coaching staff wants to do. And he addressed needs. When he overlooked the offensive line, if you want to look at it that way, he addressed valuable needs. Giants needed a safety. Giants needed a face of the franchise type of safety and a safety who can create turnovers, who has amazing eyes and vision, because that's what Shane Bowen is going to use. Giants needed a cornerback, a possibly starting cornerback in a nickel personnel with some flexibility to be kicked outside. He'll probably end up settling in a nickel spot. And guess what? He's a more fluid athlete than even a Darnay Holmes and players like that. And I still like, dude, I was going through his tape before. I'm going to get a video of him in shortly, everybody. I was going through his tape before. He's not the most efficient with his feet. Like he can still clean up that footwork and he still puts himself into a position of success because of the baseline athletic traits, as we mentioned in the post-draft show. So it's just, I want to bet on that. I will bet on that. And I'll hope that he can get coached up in other areas of his game, but the secondary was a huge need as well. And they have guys in place on the offensive line who are far better than the options that they've had in recent memory. So I'm okay with them overlooking the offensive line. The fact that they overlooked the defensive line too, and when you look at, I think they were the only, I saw Justin Pennick tweet this, they're the only team in the NFL that did not select an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman. And that's wild, but they also only had 6 picks. There were some teams that had 9 picks. Yeah, the Eagles, I think the Eagles had 9 picks and they traded and got 3 extra picks for next year. I was like, Howie Roseman is just insane with how he deals with the draft. I respect it. I really do. I just hate the Eagles.
Yeah, and I think that's just how drafts are going to shake out sometimes, Nick. Like, you're not going to get an offensive lineman and defensive lineman in every draft. We said we would like an offensive line. First of all, defensive lineman, like, guys, We have Brian Burns, Dexter Lawrence, and Kayvon Thibodeau. We just used a big pick on Kayvon Thibodeau, and we used the 39th pick on Brian Burns, and we have Dexter Lawrence. Like, how many more defensive linemen do we want to get? Do we not understand that, like, yes, I agree, trenches are important. Defensive line is important. I want a fourth pass rusher for Shane Bowen. I want rotational guys so Lawrence doesn't have to play a million snaps. I get all that. But by the way, Ojulari's not dead. He's still on the roster, and he may be a good fit for this system. I know you don't want to buy into it. That's fine. He's been injured. I'll give you that. But defensive line, Joe Shane's going to add defensive linemen. Before now in September, Joe Shane will add at least one, maybe two defensive linemen for that rotation. And they're going to be fine because you can always find defensive linemen late in free agency. And it's the most abundant position in the entire NFL. I don't mind it. I don't mind drafting it because, again, I think there's an advantage to the idea that, yes, things are changing. You want to get interior pressure. You want to exterior pressure is a little easier for quarterbacks to maneuver in the pocket, and interior is even better. Fine, I give you that. I always want to build in the trenches. The game is played in the trenches. Give you that too, and I like that too. But I'm not going to go crazy with a stat like this, especially when I look deeper, Nick, and I'm like, I don't know if I really pick 70. We'll get to that one. That's the one where I think maybe you could say they could have taken an offensive lineman. And actually, shout out Justin Pennant because he did a breakdown on this, and the way he broke this down, I saw it 100% the exact same way as him. And I want to talk it through with you a little bit later on this pod, Nick, and get your take on it. But we'll go over that. But at these other picks, man, like I just don't see it the way that other people do. But back to what some themes of this draft and direction they're headed in addition to adding explosiveness to this roster, I feel like they made it a really important thing for them to find like tough, competitive, and feisty type football players, like a different style of football player. Malik Neighbors, you watch him out there, he is a freaking dog out there. Same goes for basically every player they selected in this class, in my mind, with the exception of, you can say, maybe not Theo Johnson, but then you watch Theo Johnson, and he's hard to take down. And it's not like he's not a dog out there, but the rest of this crew really is. I really think that was important for them to add a competitive, like tough feistiness to this team, because it's not to say they were soft last year, Nick, but I'm not so sure they had this amazing identity defensively or offensively, to be completely honest.
I don't think that's an unfair take. Now, I wouldn't say they were soft either. And Deontay Banks, picks like that, he plays with a feisty edge. But when you watch Andrew Phillips, it's a little bit different. Like Andrew Phillips is somebody who flies downhill. And I think one of the reasons why they love him so much is his willingness in run support. And also just how he takes on stalk blocks, his positioning and run support to force defenders to the inside. Like he does a really good job executing those types of nuanced assignments. So I think that was a priority for this draft class. I think that's a priority for them just in general. What's going on, Big Blue Banter listeners? I'm excited for the football season for several reasons. And one of those reasons is Prize Picks, which is North America's largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform. And it's so simple to use. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including professionals, sharks, and people who are going to exploit you, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you just watch the winnings roll in. It's very simple to play and gives you a little extra skin. I've set my picks in less than 60 seconds. There are so many stats to choose from, and the withdrawals of funds are easy and quick. Dan and I will be adding a segment to our show before every game where we pick our favorite stats, more or less yards or touchdowns, what have you, and we'll be discussing why from a scheme, matchup, and game theory perspective. I love their promotions and how easy their interface is to operate at Prize Picks. I may select more on tackles for a loss from Bobby Okereke or Kayvon Thibodeau next game. They also do other sports as well. It's a really cool experience. Please join Dan and I in the fun of Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/banter and use code BANTER for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/banter and use code BANTER for a first deposit match up to $100. You will not regret it. You ever feel sluggish or out of focus? Are you stressed? Has your digestive system caused discomfort or flatulence like a certain co-host on this podcast during a live stream? If so, you should check out AG1. When I started drinking AG1 daily, I could feel a real difference in my daily health. I had more energy, I was better off at the gym, and I could focus on my work in a much more efficient manner. That's because AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that supports your body's universal needs like gut optimization, stress management, and immune support. Since 2010, AG1 has led the future of foundational nutrition, continuously refining their formula to create a smarter, better way to elevate your baseline health. Not only did I replace my multivitamin with AG1, but I love that every scoop also includes prebiotics, probiotics, and digestive enzymes for gut support. I recommend AG1 to all my family and friends because AG1 has a team of doctors and scientists that formulate around the latest science and maintains high quality standards within the industry. Even my friends have started drinking AG1, and they always tell me how energetic they feel and how it's helped them out at the gym, and also it's helped them manage their stress levels. That's why we're happy to have AG1 as our partner. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs when you first subscribe. Go to drinkag1.com/banter. That's drinkag1.com/banter to check it out. Our mental and physical well-being is of the utmost importance. Whether you're a world-class athlete or a podcaster like me, we all need to take that very seriously. That's why I'm excited that Unified Healing is sponsoring this episode of the Big Blue Banter podcast. Unified Healing is a new and super innovative global network of wellness centers powered by Energy Enhancement System, or EE System. If you haven't heard of the EE System yet, you'll want to listen up. This technology promotes wellness, deep relaxation, purification, and rejuvenation. Whether you're here in New York, New Jersey, Arizona, if you will, or hundreds of other locations across the globe, access to a center is easy and affordable. Interested in experiencing the EE System technology for yourself? Go to unifiedhealing.com/banter to learn more and find a center near you. That's UNIFYD healing.com/banter. No material or testimonials on the Unified Healing website are intended to be viewed as medical advice or a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment. And before undertaking a new healthcare regimen, include EE System.
And I think, Joe Shane said to the media, you can take it for what it's worth, that every pick they made in this class was the highest graded player on their board at the time of the pick. You may look at that, but and I think it's fair to say, like, there's human nature to this, Nick. Like, if you're doing a horizontal board and you have a safety here and a running back here, and it's like neck and neck, or a safety here and a whatever here, wide receiver here, and it's neck and neck, you're probably going to take the position you need more. I think a lot of GMs will do that, but I don't think that there's like a situation where they've got a player ranked here on their board and they're taking a player ranked here on their board because he's a safety or whatever position that might be. Like, people are, Tyler Newman. Newman was ranked a lot of people like Newman. And if he didn't have that athletic testing, I think he would have been viewed as potentially borderline first round pick. Like, I don't think that's necessarily a reach for need pick. And I know he even said this, and I thought this was really important, or I thought this was really poignant, I should say, about their 4th round pick, Theo Johnson, because this is one that just bothers me, Nick. Like, I'm bothered by how many fans don't like this pick, or it's like, this is another needs pick, or like, there should have gone offensive line. First of all, let me start with the top of that, Nick. Go offensive line. Did we not just experience Matt Parrott? And do you not just look across the league and see how many offensive linemen drafted 90th overall or after bust? Don't just look at the Tyler Smith success stories. They're not like that. Most of these offensive linemen drafted are massive developmental picks. And we just went over yesterday, this is not a developmental league for offensive linemen. If you draft the 4th round offensive lineman, he sits on your bench the first year, he didn't get any better. He didn't get any closer to making an NFL. And you might get lucky and you might put him in your lineup and he might hit right away, or he might just never get it. Like, the best example for me, Nick, was the Theo Johnson pick. And as Joe Shane said after the draft, he said, we closed out day 2 and we were looking at our board. Theo Johnson was sticking out to us. He was essentially this far ahead of everybody else on the board as any other player. So you could look at it and say from the outside, oh, Darren Waller's going to retire. The Giants kind of need a tight end, so they went with a tight end there. Or you can think about it, look at your own board and be like, wait a second. We're talking about a tight end who's 6'6", 260, and can move. First of all, there's not that many tight end prospects like that in the entire NFL. Then you watch him extend away from his frame and make a catch. You watch him immediately become a red zone threat. He had 7 touchdowns last year. Should have been more on Penn State. He's big. He's elusive in the red zone. He can run routes in the red zone. He can catch away from his frame. He can control his body in the red zone. He's got leaping ability. And you think to yourself, wait a second, that's probably a round 2 prospect. I mean, you see a lot of tight ends go in round 2 range, and if not, maybe early round 3. You're getting him in the beginning of round 4. So that is not a needs pick. Sure, it fits a need because Darren Waller is retiring, but it's not an actual needs pick. It's potentially the best player on the board. I thought it was the best player on the board, to me, considerably at that point, Nick.
High ceiling player too. I mean, I did an evaluation on him before the combine, and I came away with a low second round grade on him. And again, don't think he matches from a play speed standpoint, but it was still obvious that he had this nimble footwork about him in certain situations. I don't think his change of direction is great, but man, he has good flexion in his lower half. When he is blocking, you could see that he's an angular athlete at that size. Somebody put a comp of Theo Johnson in one of the YouTube videos, might have been the film review of Theo Johnson that we have on the channel. Please go to the channel and see some of the film breakdowns that we have. That would be excellent. Thank you so much. And I saw this comp, and I wish I put it out there first because I saw this comp and thought about this comp when I was watching his tape at Penn State, and it was Logan Thomas.
Logan Thomas, interesting. I kind of like that comp.
It's a little difficult because he was a quarterback at Virginia Tech, so you didn't get to see him coming out of college. Right. But what he has been for the Washington Commanders over the last couple seasons, I think Theo Johnson can be that for the New York Giants. A reliable, big-bodied, almost wide receiver type of player. But I think Theo Johnson has more blocking upside than Logan Thomas does. As for a guy who was a quarterback, dude, he has like really good receiving traits.
He does. And he got injured a lot, by the way, as a tight end with the Washington. He made some headway, started having some good games, good weeks, and then got injured and it kept happening. But he's made some progress there and obviously had some production there. I think specifically in the red zone is where we're going to see Johnson show up early. But to me, like, that's not like when you take a player like that with that kind of athletic profile and the traits as well, potentially as a blocker and the frame, you're not taking, in my mind, a need pick there because you lost a tight end. You're taking who you felt like was the best projection and best player to get. Like, you're not going to get somebody with his kind of upside, in my mind, at pick 107 at every position. I don't think you're getting it on the lines, either side, maybe defensive line as a shot. You might have a shot at corner. You might have a shot at receiver and running back is where you can get that potentially. And as the Giants did with their round 5 pick, they went running back because they know that you can get potential guys who actually hit and make an impact at certain positions on day 3. Some positions you can't, and some positions you never will. But I believe that pick was what Joe Schoen said it was. He was sticking out that far on their board going into day 3, where he was so far ahead of the prospects that were left at all their positions. So I don't know, man. I didn't feel like this was a needs draft, but I know others did, and that's okay. But I want to ask you, Nick, and pivot a little bit as we continue some of these like bigger questions. What was your coming out of day 1? Let's say let's break it down to each day. Coming out of day 1, my question for you would be, what about quarterback? And what would be your answer to that? Because I know there are a lot of fans listening and there are fans online who are just unhappy, and they were going to be unhappy with this draft in my mind unless they went quarterback. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think they wanted to go with Drake May. Drake May was their highest graded quarterback, not named Caleb Williams. They couldn't get Drake May, and they weren't as sold on JJ McCarthy as a lot of other people were. I like JJ McCarthy. I wasn't going to be enthused if he was the pick at 6 because I don't know exactly what that ceiling is. I think he's in a great spot right now in Minnesota. But getting Malik Neighbors, if that's a consolation prize, then I'm perfectly happy with that consolation prize. Malik Neighbors, we said this on the last podcast, this guy has top 5 wide receiver potential. So whoever the quarterback is of the future, if he is not currently on the New York Giants roster, he's going to have a real freaking weapon. Like that, you could put to bed the argument, oh, the Giants don't have any weapons to throw the football to. Like that, right. that argument is asleep right now. It's going to be asleep for a while if Malik Neighbors stays healthy. And I absolutely love that fact because that's another subplot to the dysfunction that's plagued the New York Giants for quite a while now. Trust me, I want a quarterback. That is something that I have desired, but I don't want a quarterback just to get a quarterback for quarterback's sake.
I feel the same way, Nick. I don't want a quarterback just to get a quarterback for quarterback's sake. I talked a little bit at the beginning of the show, but I don't know. Talk to people who had their boots on the ground at the Senior Bowl, and I don't think they saw next superstar elite quarterback out of anyone who was at that Senior Bowl, and that means Michael Penix, Bo Nix, Spencer Rattler. A lot of people I actually talked to said Spencer Rattler was the best projection of all the quarterbacks there, and he didn't go until round 5. Now, obviously, that has a lot to do with off-field stuff. We heard from Ian Rappaport that a lot of coaches and GMs watched his series. What was the series he was on? Like a
Dude, he was
YouTube
like
series.
16 though. Isn't that a little bit
I know,
strong?
it's so effed up. I know he feels like he's a different person now, but clearly they also like brought him in for interviews and felt like maybe wasn't a different person based on that. You still have to do well in the interviews. Falls all the way to round 5, but I don't know. I don't think there were that many people who were like, no, the NFL drafted these guys at 8 and 12, so they're definitely going to be superstars when they were at the Senior Bowl and they were watching these guys not so good at the Senior Bowl. So I just, the way I look at quarterback here is the same way Nick does. I wanted a quarterback too. You guys are, plenty of people in the comments have already accused me of being anti-Daniel Jones, biggest hater ever. All I care about is quarterback. All I do is obsess over quarterback. And I get it because that is true. I believe it's the most important position by far. I believe that a lot of the lack of success the Giants have had is not just because of the offense lines, because the quarterback, like Nick, and this is a product of watching as much film as we do and having the podcast be a film-based podcast during the season where we are literally spending hours each week to watch the tape, and then we're putting it online. We're not putting as much as we used to as far as tape goes. We're putting enough, and then we're analyzing it. And when you watch the tape, you realize, because you're watching every play multiple times, not every play is a jailbreak for the quarterback. Not every play is the quarterback has no time. There have been plenty of plays, even last season before Daniel Jones got hurt, where he had the pocket and he made the poor decision to escape the pocket to his right, or he made the poor decision to not throw the football. Either of those two things. But the way that some fans describe it as every single play was a jailbreak and the breakdown of the O-line, it's just not realistic or real. And I would advise you to go back and watch a game film, buy the Game Pass, and chart it for yourself and watch every drop back. And I'm not telling you that a lot of these dropbacks weren't pressured, but 100% the way you guys describe it as, or 95, 100%, is just unrealistic and untrue. And it's those other plays. It's the ones where he's not pressured, where we're grading Daniel Jones and where we're looking for more from the quarterback. So, yes, I wanted a quarterback as well, but I don't think the Giants are any closer to being successful if they force quarterback here, Nick. And all I think it would have actually done is mean they don't have a Malik Neighbors on their roster, a 20-year-old prospect that we believe has a ceiling. Like you said, I really do believe what you said, top 5 in the NFL type of ceiling. We don't get that prospect then. We don't get him at 20. We don't get him if we sign a second contract at 25. And all we have is his quarterback who, yeah, on paper, a lot of fans, it would have been happier, dude. If we had taken JJ at 6, there's a lot of fans who would have been happier. And on paper, I can give them that. It would have looked like, wow, there's now hope for the quarterback position. It's possible. But I watched JJ and you watched JJ, man. And for me, it was hard to see a ceiling as a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. There are routes, but when you have that level of arm talent, it's just hard for me to buy into as being a ceiling. And I went over this in the pre-draft, Nick, and I'll close out here because I know you want to make a point. But when we went over in the pre-draft and we looked at all of the elite quarterbacks currently playing in the NFL, not a single one in my mind has J.J. McCarthy's arm talent, comparable arm talent to J.J. McCarthy. And I know J.J. McCarthy has good velocity. That's one part of arm talent. But it's touch, it's trajectory, it's throwing to all levels of the field, it's anticipatory throwing. And I got to be honest with you, none of those quarterbacks right now that are elite quarterbacks have his arm.
And I think that's exactly what Joe Schoen basically told the New York Giants without directly saying it.
Right.
So we're not going to go with this. We want to go with the star wide receiver. And I think there was an interesting exchange that Joe Schoen had with the media when he was talking about all the work that him and Brandon Beane did on the 2018 quarterback class and how every year they do a ton of work on the quarterbacks. And it's not just because they're interested in quarterbacks. Now, he was saying that to say, hey, we might not have been interested in Drake May and JJ McCarthy. That was complete and utter bullshit. But what it does tell me is Joe Schoen has done a lot of work on quarterbacks through each and every draft class to the point where if there is a free agent, a veteran free agent, a la a Baker Mayfield type of situation with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last year, the Giants will not be scared to sign that player, bring him in, and maybe they feel good about those types of players. Maybe they feel good about how they would mesh with Brian Daboll. Maybe Brian Daboll had really good experiences when they came into Buffalo, if it was before Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen ended up coming to the New York Giants. So if you're not in love with the JJ McCarthys, don't hitch your wagon to that because there could be options, not just through the draft later on, that you can look into. And if there are players in the draft, you can always trade up. You can try to get them if it does take 2 to tango, or you can select guys that you fall in love with, but they weren't in love. That's blatantly obvious at this point. So don't force it if it's not there.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Now, the counter to that people are saying is, Nick, well, they may not be in love with these quarterbacks, but the rest of the NFL was, because they took one at 8, one at 12, and one at 10. But just because the NFL's in love with quarterbacks doesn't make me want to be in love with them any more than it did before that. Because I don't think have we not seen the JP Lossmans and the EJ Manuels, and these are like early second round picks. I can go to
Why
like
are you
the
picking on
Brandon
the Bills,
Whedons.
bro? Jeez.
Yeah, the Brandon Whedons. Like, just because these guys have first round capital doesn't mean that they're going to be great or that they ever even really had a chance to be great in my mind. I think there's a chance JJ McCarthy can be great. I'm skeptical about Penix. I really am. I don't personally understand it. Now I'm even more skeptical given where he was drafted, but I don't really fully understand it. And on that, and then Bo Nix, like, again, ask people who had boots on the ground at the Senior Bowl, because I've talked to multiple of them. That's not an NFL arm. And maybe it'll work with Sean Payton in the Denver air, and he has Troy Franklin. I don't know. I do trust Sean Payton a lot. It might work. And like you said, like, he has good arm talent in some ways. Like, he could get off platform and change his arm slot and make really good throws. But it's using the entire field. For him and McCarthy, for me, it was always about, can these guys use the entire field? Because if they can't use the entire field at the NFL level, we're right back where we started with Daniel Jones, because we don't use the entire field right now. And we see what that does to your passing offense when you have a quarterback who's not throwing consistently in the 20 to 40 or 20 to 40 plus range. And so that was always my concern with those two. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, one thing on the JJ McCarthy point, I can see where some people are at with JJ McCarthy and wanting JJ McCarthy, because at least JJ McCarthy has the gumption to challenge those tight windows.
Right.
Not a lot of quarterbacks have that. And that's valuable. It's very valuable in the NFL. It's just it leaves a lot to be desired from an arm talent standpoint and a deep accuracy standpoint. I like JJ. If the Giants selected JJ McCarthy, I wouldn't have thrown a fit. I'd have been like, I'm cautiously optimistic with this pick. Brian Dable, see what you can do. He's a young kid. He's athletic. I don't love his frame. I don't love his arm, but I would be cautiously optimistic about the pick overall. But now that they didn't commit to a quarterback, I remain like, okay, our quarterback situation, it's still up in the air. They can figure that out as they go, hopefully, right? But now at least you have Malik Neighbors in place to be that star stud top 10 wide receiver in the league on your roster for the next 5 years.
Right. And I think to that point that you made about McCarthy, it's like, you said you'd be okay with it. And I would be too, Nick. And we would even grow to be, happy and excited for it, because there's new talent there at quarterback. But part of why we said that, and you said it, and I agree with you, is because of Brian Dable. If that's one of your reasons that it's because of the coach you get to work with, it's just not a good enough reason for me. And personally, like, I want the reason to be to be more of my own projection for this quarterback, independent of the coach he gets. And I say that because people are going to look back on this class, Nick, and if JJ McCarthy hits, and let's say use the word hits, because, like, I'll say if he hits and it's just like a, Cousins or Daniel Jones in 2022 type, that version of hit, right? And Cousins was above that level. Let's say between that tier, between what Jones was in 2022 to what Cousins, Dak are now. People are going to be like, this was a mistake. The Giants should have done this. Giants should have had this. One, I don't know if that's true, because we're striving for elite quarterbacks. Two, like, these situations are not comparable. If the Giants drafted JJ at 6, there's no Malik Neighbors. Okay, so now you have a pretty good receiver core that we like more than most, but clearly isn't Justin Jefferson, Addison, and TJ Hawkinson. You don't have the 2 tackles now. You only have 1 tackle, Andrew Thomas. You don't have the Vikings tackles. And so it's just not a similar situation at all. So and there's no Neighbors. So it's like, I don't know necessarily if I could just look back on it. And if JJ does become one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, Nick, like one of the top 5, I think that's when I'm okay being like, okay, the Giants didn't see this one right.
Yeah. And I'll say I was cautiously optimistic based on the tape, but I'm also not holding it against JJ McCarthy that he played in Michigan's scheme. I'm judging based on what he's shown as a passer and as a thrower of the football. A lot of people just hold it. Oh, wow, he threw 8 passes in this game. He must suck. I'm not thinking that at all. It's just, I see he has the fastball. Where's his changeup? Where's his curveball? Where's his screwball? He doesn't have that. I love the confidence, and I love the fact that he's a winner as well. And I think we beat the drum on JJ McCarthy at this point. I think our listeners understand where we're at with the quarterback position. And I love how we're getting pillared from both sides of the aisle right now.
We are getting pillared from both sides of the aisle. It's funny, but it's a tough question because a lot of people wanted to come out of this draft with a quarterback no matter what. And I just don't think we were ever on board with that. You and I, Nick, we see eye to eye on this one. And we thought it had to be a quarterback that had a conviction can be a top 5 guy. And I don't think it's unfair of them to not have those convictions for Penix, Nix, and JJ McCarthy. I'll see if I'm wrong about that. And I'll admit it if I'm wrong about that. And it's not that I don't like those guys, as Nick said. I see upside potentially for McCarthy, but it's not the path I would want to take. Now let's get to the biggest question coming out of day 2, Nick, which was, what about the offensive line? right? The Giants draft a safety at 47. They draft a corner at 70. No offensive lineman then. I'm less concerned about them not going offensive line on day 3 of a draft because, I think it's developmental at that point and a big risk altogether unless you can just like luck box into Trey Smith because he's falling because of like some medical issue, but the tape's already there that he could be a guy. Not as many examples outside of those types. So day 2, though. What about offensive line? How would you respond to that question? And do you want me to set it up first? I'll set it up first here because Justin
Set it
Penick
up.
set this up, and I think it's a good way to set it up. At the first pick where the Giants got Newman, the safety, Zach Frazier went at 51. Patrick Paul went after that. Blake Fisher, and then Roger Rosengarten. Those were the offensive linemen who the Giants passed up on. So answer this question however you want. That's the context of who they passed up on.
So I haven't watched extensive tape on a lot of those players. I know them through watching Washington football and some of the players I've seen just from watching defenders they went up against, but I didn't do full evaluations on them. Unfortunately, I didn't think the Giants were going to invest too highly in the offensive line. I think it was a need. I thought on day 2 they would have poked and prodded, but we said for quite a while that secondary is what we thought the New York Giants would do, or wide receiver if they did go quarterback, but they would have probably only had 1 pick on day 3 if they did end up going quarterback because they would have traded up unless they sat at 6. But regardless of that, I like the Tyler Nubin pick. I understand where they're coming from. I don't think Tyler Nubin's a perfect prospect. If they went with an interior offensive lineman there, I would have been fine with it. If you went with a tackle there, you're basically saying, Evan Neal, you're done. That's going to affect the kid's confidence. And I'm not looking to not draft a talented football player just because of Evan Neal's confidence, but I don't think Joe Shane and Brian Dable are done with Evan Neal. I think that's exactly what it says. I think they had the contingency plan in place with Jermaine Illuminor. That made a lot of sense because you can use him and he has utility on the inside. But now you're going to draft over a guy you just selected in the top 10 2 years ago. I think that's just a little rich when you have other needs on your roster. So that's what I would say about the tackle position. I would have been fine with a selection of an interior offensive lineman, but I think they really wanted somebody who would be a tone setter and a culture shifter on the back end of the defense, similar to what Xavier McKinney was. And also something that Joe Shane said, they wanted somebody who can force turnovers. And that's what Tyler Nubin does. He had 13 forced turnovers and he had a shit ton of PBUs as well. And he's all over the catch point and he's a center field safety who's going to fit perfectly into the quarters and the 2 high half field type of stuff that Shane Bowen is going to run. So that would have been the opportunity cost as you would have lost out on that player, Tyler Nubin. So I'm fine with Tyler Nubin over some of these offensive linemen, specifically the tackles more so. Interior offensive linemen, I could have easily been talked into.
Yeah, and I understand that, Nick. And I think, a good point is, people are saying, oh, Joe Shane's a needs-based drafter. I don't like that take, but I'll say if you want to make the argument that he's a scheme-based drafter, I'm okay with that because I do feel like these two defensive backs were really scheme-based picks in a lot of ways. That's not a bad thing, by the way. If you think that these guys can break out within a specific scheme and it's your specific scheme, you're seeing value in that. You're looking at a guy like, this guy may be rated blah, blah, blah by the rest of the NFL. For us, he's rated here because we see how he fits in our system, and our system's going to get this out of him. Meanwhile, another system could get this out of him. And I think that makes total sense to me, by the way.
Pre-draft, we said, look, Shane Bowen had Kevin Byard and Amani Hooker as their safeties. We really think they're going to go into the season with Jason Pinnock and Dane Belton, and that's it? Javarius Owens? Jalen Mills?
That matters in this defense.
It does.
And that's important. And I don't think that's something that should be. And then again, you could say, oh, it's need based, but I don't think either of those guys were reaches. But for me, I look at that and I say this: Roger Rosengarten, Nick, he made the My Guys show. Do you know where he made it, dude? At pick 107 is where I thought we could get him or maybe get him. I was like, at 70, it'll be all right. But like, I would rather him at 107. I remember saying that on the show. I liked his profile, but there's a lot of flaws within his profile. Power, play strength. There's not a ready-made player right there. Tyler Nubin's a ready-made starter for you 95% of the snaps and has upside. Like, I wouldn't be pissed if the Giants took Roger Rosengarten at 47, who went for 6 picks later. And it's Baltimore, so it might be the right pick. And I do think he has crazy upside. So I don't think this is necessarily a bad pick. But it's that then to me, you're starting to reach for needs if you're going down that board. So I think the other side of the argument goes that way. I didn't get a chance to study Patrick Paul that much. I saw a little bit of Blake Fisher. Zach Frazier, like the Giants can't draft Zach Frazier. I loved his tape. I thought he was underrated, but he was a center only. And then we have to move John Michael Schmitz to guard, where I don't even really like him at all. And I think that's a total mess of a situation. So he doesn't even matter to me. But then you get to pick 70. And this is the one where I feel like it's more open for discussion for me and open for interpretation. Here are the players that were selected on the offensive line right after pick 70. Again, you could look at any draft board, but I do credit Justin Penick for this argument because it was an interesting one. I was thinking about it as well, and I wanted to discuss it with you, Nick. After Andrew Phillips at pick 70, Isaiah Adams from Illinois, Cooper Beebe to the Cowboys at pick 73. And another guy who we discussed, Christian Haynes at pick 81. Is this a spot where you can get more mad, for example? Or what are your thoughts on, no offensive lineman at 70 either?
I don't think mad is the right term. I'm not going to get mad about it.
Right.
I understand where they're coming from. They need a cornerback. They want somebody who can play outside, inside. They want somebody who can be a force defender against the run in nickel personnel. And Andrew Phillips can do all of those things. They want somebody who can.
Let me say one thing, Nick. On top of all that, he's also a good prospect. He's a damn good prospect. Like, he's a good prospect to get at 70. That's the thing.
At 70, yeah. I wasn't as high on him as like the Dane Bruglers of the world,
Sure.
and some of these guys that I really respect who are like, oh, this is one of the. I love the temperament and the feistiness. I do think there are some issues in coverage, but I think that stuff can be ironed out because, as I always say, he has the baseline athletic traits, and he is freaking smooth to the point where he can be inefficient with his feet and still recover and get into phase. And I will bet on that all day.
Okay.
But I love Cooper Beebe. I like Christian Haynes a lot. I liked a lot of those guards. I'm not going to sit here and throw a temper tantrum because the New York Giants went with a cornerback that they so desperately need, who has a very high ceiling, didn't have the ball skills in college. I don't think he's all that great at the catch point, but I still think he puts himself into a position to where he can learn those types of things. It's not maybe innate in him, but he's in phase quite often. He has man coverage skills. He has zone skills. He's so damn explosive on the click and close, on the plant and drive. So I'm not going to sit here and throw a fit about it. If they went with the interior offensive lineman, I wouldn't have thrown a fit about passing up on Andrew Phillips either, because I would have saw what they were trying to do. They're bringing in the offensive lineman to compete for the spot opposite of John Runyon, since John Runyon has 3 years on contract. But you still have Illuminor there. You still have Josh Azudu there. I don't know if they're done with those players. There's enough contingency plans on the offensive line to say, yeah, you can go after the cornerback that you're going to need, who might play 700 plus snaps for you on defense. That's fine. Go and do that. I wouldn't be mad with either situation. I can explain it in my mind why Joe Shane did what he did, but it does make sense to get a cornerback in that spot. And if it passed up on Cooper Beebe, look, I'm not enthused about passing up on Cooper Beebe, but I can get it because it makes sense too.
I agree with that.
It's just not like, it's not that simple, Dan, where you're like,
that's what it comes. It's hard for me to compartmentalize this and like contextualize this. Go on with it. I like that take. It's not that.
Well, it's just not that simple. Look, we don't get to interview these guys, right? Like they get to interview these guys. These guys have plans. There's a trade-off. You get one selection out of 15 players that you might like. There could be 15 different scenarios where you could talk yourself into this selection. I'm going to trust the fact that these guys prioritized the traits that they want and brought the right player onto the roster to compete for playing time. And Andrew Phillips is going to do that, man. Andrew Phillips is going to do that. I don't think he's the perfect prospect, but I can bet on the traits that he possesses because there's not a lot of players who possess his type of movement skills, his type of fluidity, and his type of explosiveness at a position that prioritizes it in a system that it's crucial in, because you're going to be playing from depth a lot and you're going to be planting and driving through the catch point, and you need somebody who is a sound tackler. I think he can work on that a little bit, but damn does he want to tackle. He has the balls to tackle. And I want a corner and a nickelback who has the balls to tackle, especially if you're a nickel personnel so often against these RPO teams where you need to match these weird personnel packages and you need to freaking be a force defender. Just watch him. He is a force freaking defender, even though he's a little bit small in size.
Yes, and there's so many commonalities that you have on film when you watch the amount of film that we watch during the season, the regular season film we have. We do the film review every week, Nick. I got to be honest with you, one of the commonalities for me throughout the season, not game after game, but overall from a lot of the games, was I always felt like we needed a little bit more physicality driving downhill into the alley. I did believe that. I thought Pinnock did a good job sometimes with that. McKinney did a good job sometimes with that. But I didn't think that we always got that from the corners or from the nickel corner. I think we're going to get a lot more of that now that we have these two guys added to the mix, Newman and Phillips. I think we're going to see a lot more of better tackles at that point. We're going to see a lot more big plays made on screens, blown up, potential forced fumbles, things of that nature, big power, tough physical play at the point of at the catch point, or the run point, whether it be he breaks in that second level. And I'm just talk to me. If they had taken Cooper Beebe there, I would have been happy too, Nick. I would have been.
Yes.
And I'm good with that. Christian Haynes was a player I didn't get a chance to watch, unfortunately, as much as I wanted to. I am a little scared of anyone coming from that conference. I'm going to be honest with you. It might be Matt Parrott. I'm sure he is. It might be Matt Parrott PTSD, but the level of competition, whatever he's facing there at UConn, it does scare me a little bit, but he is a good football player. People like him a lot. So it's not like I was going to be mad at either of those picks. But at the same time, I'm not going to sit here and be like, they screwed up. These guys were on the board, because there's so much we don't know. And also, I don't think either of these guys were reaches. That's my main
And also
thing.
just follow what this front office did in free agency, Dan. What did they do in free agency? They brought in 4 offensive linemen.
Right.
They brought in 4 offensive linemen. One that they do not want to start at tackle, but he's the contingency plan to Evan Neal.
Right.
Aaron Stinney is now your interior offensive lineman, who's probably going to be the swing guy, him or Josh Azudu. And that's a situation that they're willing to roll the dice on. And I'm fine with that. You have Schlottman to back up John Michael Schmitz. Last year, I don't even know who their backup center was. Once Hassenauer ended up going down, they were doing all this crazy, funky shit. You had Josh Azudu playing guard. He was then playing tackle. They fixed that situation with competent veteran depth to go into the draft to where they were only going to select an offensive lineman unless they absolutely loved him and unless he fell to them at the right value. If that did not happen, they were going to address the other needs on their roster while picking players that they had similarly graded. And I'm okay with that approach because it is crossing T's and it is dotting I's. And that's what I want from my general manager. I want a sound process to where you're not having your ass out in the freaking wind. And I don't think the Giants have their ass in the wind right now, especially with the offensive line and the secondary. I still think there are other aspects of the roster I'm not in love with, but you can't fill every need.
Yeah, they're going a different route on the offensive line. We're going to see if it works. It's development, it's coaching, it's prioritizing veterans over the young guys who have made mental errors, let's be honest, and who have had issues picking up stunts and things that should be a little bit more common. Like even a guy like Stinney, like you talked about, he played last year. These guys been in the NFL and they haven't been nightmare disasters like some of the Giants offensive linemen have been through the years. Shane Lemieux, right? Like these guys, even, to an extent at times, Josh Azudu. And I liked some of the flashes from his rookie season, but there were other moments in pass protection where you would look at it on film and you're like, this is a disaster right now. And I'm not so sure a veteran would be this poor at picking up this stunt or, getting into a stance quicker. So I'm not necessarily so sure I don't love the plan at the O-line. It's going to be a lot of projection. It was going to be projection anyway if we had Cooper Beebe on this roster, right? Like Cooper Beebe wasn't solving every problem on your offensive line. And there was a chance he wasn't even playing at all if we had drafted him this year. So I've asked you, Nick, what direction are we headed in for the main question? What about QB out of day 1? What about O-line out of day 2? Here's my question for you about day 3. Are you kidding me? That's my question. That's my question, not for you, but maybe for everyone else listening. Like, people don't like the day 3 for the Giants, dude. I already talked about Theo Johnson a little bit earlier. I thought he was the best player on the board, but I don't know, man. Tyrone Tracy at pick 166. People are like, oh, look at all these offensive linemen at 166. What do you think you're getting there? Like, first of all, the Giants and any team will be lucky if you get any kind of contributor at pick 166. That almost goes for 107. 107 is kind of that, like they always say, it's like pick after around pick like 108, 110 is when there's like the cutoff for NFL for what you can expect something out of these guys or not. But dipping down to, and by the way, I have it written down, Nick. I just want to go over it real quick. It's not like they passed over some great guys to take Theo Johnson, Javon Foster, Tanner Bortolini and his short arms, and Mason McCormick, a guy I said I kind of like, but like coming from a small school and obviously not like a you can't miss offensive lineman. I'll take Theo Johnson over every single one of those guys, the upside of a Theo Johnson, okay? And it's not even close to me. I'm getting potentially I think Theo Johnson has this traits to potentially evolve. It's not say he will, but to potentially evolve to one of the 12 best tight ends in the NFL. I really do believe that at 6'6", 260. And we'll see if it happens, but I strongly believe that. And I don't think you can find those kind of traits on the offensive line there at that stage. But as you get to pick 166 with Tyrone Tracy, what's better for the team, man? A team that has no explosive plays, as you talked about, near dead in the last in the league, a team where Joe Shane said in his post-draft presser, Nick, he said, what I love about Brian Daboll, and I've been around a lot of guys in this business, and he's the best at this, is he's not a square peg into a round hole kind of coach. He doesn't say, you play this position, you play the Y, you play the Z, you play the running back. He doesn't believe in that. And they're asking about, well, how do these guys fit your scheme? It's like the answer is, I don't know yet. We need to get out on the field in OTAs, and I'll see how to best use these guys. And that's Tyrone Tracy. He's going to find ways to add a guy who has 4.48 speed, unbelievable change of direction skills that you could see on film, the ability to get skinny through holes, the ability to explode into contact and then break out of contact, not go down, the ability to change directions, his forced missed tackle rate, one of the 5 best in the class, his yards after contact per attempt, the best in the class. Yeah, he's 25 years old. Yeah, I don't care. He has no tread on his tires, or he's 24, turning 25. He has no tread on his tires, and I'm not looking for a long-term thing out of a running back that I draft. What I would like to get at a pick 166 Nick is some explosive plays for my offense. Can he generate that? Some explosive plays for my special teams with new kick return rules. Can he generate that? Great, because you know what's not going to happen? A D lineman or an O lineman I'm taking there is probably not breaking out as my next starter, okay? I'd rather a chance at explosive plays added to the offense. So I say, are you kidding me as a joke to that question? But I really do believe that. To me, this was as good of a day 3 as Joe Shane could have had and as good of a Joe Shane day 3 as he had. Now, the caveat to this all is, Nick, I love these two players. I spent a lot of time watching them, and I felt like they were much better than their consensus rank. So it is obviously a little biased because these were my guys. But as far as just the idea of getting them goes, I don't understand how people could be mad at these picks personally.
Yeah, and if you want to go and check out the Theo Johnson and Tyrone Tracy film reviews, they are on the channel right now. Just me breaking down, talking some shop about these two players. And I agree with you, man. You need to get explosive on offense. Tyrone Tracy's going to have a role. We gotta face the facts. We don't have Saquon Barkley anymore. It's not going to be Devin Singletary and Eric Gray. They wanted to add competition. And if Eric Gray wins that job, it's not like Tyrone Tracy's Eric Gray from last year doing nothing on the roster. He's going to have a role, not just on special teams, but also on gadget plays and also in certain personnel packages on offense because he could be a receiver. He has the ability to be a running back. Dude, 4.44 yards after contact, your first year as a running back is wildly impressive in the Big Ten.
Right.
This is a conference where running the football is it's known for that. And Purdue is not one of those schools that is known for running the football. They play a shotgun-based spread type of system. It's not like this is Wisconsin or Iowa, but they have a tough defenders, and he was still making a lot of those guys look silly. This wasn't the Big 12. So I appreciate this pick. It's a 5th round. What are we talking about here? Why are we knocking this pick? This is a 5th round, and it does fill a need for those saying, oh, well, just filling a need. It's like, it does fill a need, but guess what? It's also an explosive weapon who is going to earn a role on this offense. And he's talented too. And the analytics back that up as much as the film does. So I'm perfectly fine with this pick at this part of the draft.
I had to pick 2 players in this class that are going to make the negative fans the most foolish after this draft. It's Tyrone Tracy and Theo Johnson. And I'm more confident almost in Tyrone Tracy being some kind of addition to this offense. I really don't see. I watch him and I'm like, yes, he has a weird running style. I understand that. He runs a little upright and he's going to have to learn this position, how to learn it better. And he's going to have that every opportunity as he's transitioning from wide receiver to running back. But you can't teach his traits, like his pure athleticism that he adds to this offense. And running back is a very athleticism-based position. Yes, there are nuances to it that I discuss, and they're important, but it is in a lot of ways very much an athleticism-based position. He's adding that level to this position that we don't have. Like Devin Singletary, Eric Gray, these are good players. They're not the level athlete of this guy, and not close.
Absolutely not. If you want to split them out wide, sure. I also like, you could put him single back, 11 personnel, run him up the seam.
Right.
Purdue did that a couple times, and he was just burning past these linebackers. Now, linebackers in the NFL are a little bit faster, but if you get a defense that is running base personnel, you can come out in 12 personnel. They can match it with base, and you can catch one of their fat, slow linebackers with Tyrone Tracy up the seam. And Tyrone Tracy has at least a baseline athletic ability and natural receiving skills to make that linebacker look silly. And this is a 5th round pick that you're getting him in. It's not like he's going to be this 12 to 15 carries type of guy. He might only get, a couple carries a game, maybe a target or two, and then be a special teams asset. But if that's a difference making role in this offense that can win you a game or two, I mean, that's an elite pick in the 5th round.
Yeah.
And if something happens to Devin Singletary, now you have another option that's not just Gary Brightwell and Eric Gray.
Right. Yeah. I completely agree. This is my favorite pick of the draft from a value standpoint. This or Theo, it's tough for me. I go back and forth, but I just don't understand the hate for day 3 of this class. I don't understand what people expect out of picks this late and why just you take this offensive lineman. It's going to work out.
I don't fault them for feeling this way.
I get it because we didn't get O-line and QB in this draft, and that's important. We know these are 2 of the biggest reasons why the Giants don't win football games.
I understand the frustration. I just don't think it's that simple. And I don't know how many of these offensive linemen the Giants had on their board.
Right.
But Joe Shane has said before the draft, he's like, hey, a lot of the guys we had on our board ended up going back to school. And I thought that was peculiar that he mentioned that to the entire NFL world. And I thought maybe we'd get some trade backs to get some assets for next year's draft class. That didn't happen, right? Joe Shane did not trade in this draft class. But a lot of those guys also had some injury issues.
Last thing I want to do before we wrap up here is ask you a question about this because I tweeted about this. And once again, this was another controversial thing. I said, big picture, 30,000 foot view. It's clear that Joe Shane and Brian Dable don't have a wins mandate for 2024. And I really do believe that. I know a lot of people think they're on the hot seat. I don't necessarily think that. And I said, just look at how they drafted. And I say to that, good. We don't want to mortgage the future for fleeting immediacy. We experienced that with Dave Gettleman enough, and people don't like that. Oh, how long is it going to take? How long is it supposed to take? All these things. But like when you if you gave them a wins mandate, for example, let's just look at what I said. The specific line I said, I'm happy there was no wins mandate. A wins mandate is, Joe, Brian, you have to win 9 or 10 games this year or you're fired. If you give them that before the offseason, now they're mortgaging your future cap. Now they're doing things like using a supplemental draft pick, which means you lose next year's draft pick to take Sam Beal. Now they're trading for players that can help them right now. Now they're taking positions of need in that scenario, or players that can be ready right away to go, because you need to get to your 9 or 10 wins. I'd rather these guys be given a little bit of a leash. And I know it's crazy to think about because we want success, but it's not that easy to be successful in the NFL, especially when you don't have the position. Like people like, what about Ryan Poles? I'm like, dude, Ryan Poles is Caleb Williams now. He was gifted Caleb Williams. You know what? You know who would look good right now? Joe Shane, if he had Caleb Williams gifted to him at number 1 overall. And Ryan Poles had back-to-back number 1 overall picks. And I know maybe he's done some things better than Joe Shane, Nick. But at the same time, like if Joe Shane never had an opportunity to get that quarterback, it's just so hard for me to blame him or be like, you have to win X amount of games for this amount of time. I don't love that as much. I'm not into that.
I mean, of course. You don't want to give, that's going to create such a demand for them to make moves that are going to possibly bite them in the ass in the long run.
Right. Yeah.
But at the same time, if they fall apart this year, a la Joe Judge in his final season, then Brian Daboll might be out of a job. It's just a reality of the situation.
Yes.
You don't want to put that into the coach's mind, put that desperation. They already feel that from the media. They already feel that from all the exterior forces. You don't want the owner to come out and be like, yeah, you need to win this many games. Like, come on, like, what are we doing?
Yeah, these things are exclusive. Like Nick and I can agree that if this collapses this year, we're fine with potentially moving on from these guys, Dable and Shane. But before that happens, we don't want them that the wins mandate, like those two things don't have to be the same. You have to have a wins mandate. But like after the fact, yes, I'm okay moving on if things don't go the way they were supposed to go, even if they are putting the right things in place. And I do think they're putting the right pieces in place. If I look at this defense now, Nick, this defense after this offseason looks to me a lot better than it did even this past season, where they had some really good games on the other side of the ball. I think Brian Burns is going to matter that much. I think the pieces they added in the secondary are going to fit this scheme so much better than the pieces they had in last year's scheme, to be completely
honest. Let's look at
honest.
it this before we get out of here, Dan. Let's look at this real quick. Focus on the defense, because that's where the Giants focused on day 2, specifically in the secondary. Going into this draft, we had so many issues with the Giants roster in the secondary. I don't think the secondary I don't look at it and think, oh, wow, they're great right now. They are so much further along than they were prior to the draft. But what is the glaring weakness of the defense right now? You have a stud linebacker. You have arguably the best defensive player in the league in Dexter Lawrence. You have one of the most explosive and bendiest edge rushers in the league. You have an ascending edge rusher in Kayvon Thibodeau, another explosive bendy edge rusher in Azeez Ojulari, who can now just be a pass rushing specialist and doesn't have to get his ass kicked out there against the run. Micah McFadden, the linebacker that they drafted,
that could be the weakness, who might not even be on the field that much when we're playing a lot of safety looks.
Yeah, and I would say maybe another safety is something that like just for competition, but then you also
corner is still potentially a weakness
and cornerback, but that's the Andrew Phillips pick.
Right.
Because right now you're looking at the corner position. It's like Andrew Phillips, Deontay Banks, Cordell Flott. 2 of those guys are starting. All 3 of those guys are possibly starting. That's probably the weak point.
McLeod too. If throw him in the mix.
Yeah, if you want to throw McLeod in the mix, I'm cool with that, because I think McLeod actually has underrated tape. Still pretty weak. So is that a desperation pick with a 3rd round, to the detractors' point? I don't know if I want to quantify it that way. I don't know if I want to say that it was just pure desperation, because I also think he's a good football player, and both of those things can exist at the same time. Because if they didn't make that pick and they did go in another direction, who is playing cornerback for the New York Giants? Especially if Deontay Banks gets hurt.
Right. There's no depth there. I mean, and that's not to say like I want them to just go that route because they need that player. I want them to also feel like that player is worth that pick from a value standpoint, and I believe that they do. That's the thing. I don't think it's crazy. Like,
they brought him in.
Of people like Dane Brugler had him as a great player. Daniel Jeremiah as 52nd.
They brought him
player
in for a top 30 player, Dan. They brought him in for a top 30 visit, and when value meets need, that's where success breeds.
Yeah, and if we're taking some players like ranked 100 that no one likes, like sure, but this is not a player that nobody liked. This is not
Jay Bromley.
Yeah, this was not the next Jay Bromley, or, and some people might even argue the Cordell Flotts of the world, who you should have waited a round or two to take, that type of thing. It's just not that. I'm good with the no wins mandate. I want them to try to have their time to build this thing, man. But I want to see improvement this year, and I believe they will improve off of what the product was last year.
All right, I'm putting you on the spot before we get out of here.
Yeah.
And I know we think this stuff sucks. It's stupid. It's dumb. I like to be stupid and dumb sometimes. And listeners like it. So how do you feel grade-wise after the draft, the whole entire draft? And I'll qualify this by saying it's very stupid and dumb to give grades after a draft before you see how these guys are implemented, but we're going to do it anyways.
Sure.
What grade would you give this draft?
So I want to make sure I provide the caveat again. They drafted 3 players in this class who were my guys. I love Malik Neighbors' tape. I love Tyrone Tracy's, and I love Theo Johnson, and I love their projections, all 3 of them, not just the tape. How I project their traits will carry over versus NFL competition. So with that said, there's a big caveat. There were a lot of players drafted that I loved. Now, as I said last night on Twitter, Nick, I believe this will be Joe Shane's best draft class of the 3. Some people said, what is that worth? Doesn't mean anything. I'm like, give these draft classes a little bit of time before we're saying, like, people are like, 2023 is a bust. Oh my God. Like, I love what Cy said today, Nick, and I'm going to give a grade in a second, but I love what Cy said. David Syverson, who we have on the show, he's like, you want to get draft grade? Ask me about the 2021 draft class. I'm with him on that. You need 4 or 5 years to really judge a draft class, or 3 years to judge a draft class. Doing this whole 2023 class was a bust already is crazy. Like, that's not how any NFL team does it. So why are we doing it from the outside that way? That's stupid to me. So anyway,
with that said, here's my draft grade.
Here's my grade. So knowing that I loved a lot of players in this class, knowing that I loved some explosion we've added with Neighbors, with Tracy, with Theo Johnson, players that I believe can help immediately bring out a better side of Daniel Jones. I'm not going to say bring out the best, even though I believe he'll bring out the best. I don't want people to misconstrue that, because today someone was like, oh, you're bending on Daniel Jones. Not bending on Daniel Jones. Me thinking that he can get back to 2022 is not bending on Daniel Jones. He has that capability. We've already seen it. So I think they added players that can bring out the best in the quarterback and add explosive plays to the offense. They've done things that I really think will help this defense, both short and long term, fit the system really well. I love the value that they got on Theo. I love the value they got on Tracy. And I love Neighbors as a prospect, and I didn't want to reach for quarterback. So for me, this draft, and everybody knows I'm not the most positive person, so I don't think this is unfair. I'm giving it an A-. I am, Nick, and I don't think it's crazy. Pro Football Focus, I think, gave it an A-. I don't think we're the only ones. I'm the only one who's going to be doing this. But again, I got A+ picks on round 4 and 5 picks, and I got A on round 1. And I think across the board, I can get to B+ the rest of the way, and that gets me to A-.
When we're grading these draft classes, look, it's just how we're feeling right now after the draft.
Right.
So let's make that clear. And I don't even know if you can evaluate a draft class in a vacuum. I think you have to take the totality of what the Giants have done this entire offseason. So with that said, I'm giving it a strong B+. I think there was value that the Giants got. I think there was a priority on toughness, smart, dependable, and explosiveness. And that's what the Giants need on offense. They needed explosiveness, and they needed to find secondary pieces. And they found 2 possible starting secondary pieces, possibly a top 5 wide receiver. I think somebody who could be a tight end 1. I don't think Tracy is a pure running back 1, but I think he can work in a committee and be a reliable asset for your offense. I have yet to get a lot of eyes or a lot of film on the linebacker, so I will reserve some judgment there. From what I've collected, he's a tackling machine who's a little bit athletically limited. I'll have a video by the end of the week done of him. I got to cut up a lot of UCLA tape before I get to that. So overall, yeah, a strong B+.
I think if I look back at this, I want to ask you this question too after, and we'll wrap it up there. I think my prediction and my projection would be the Giants are going to get 3 starters out of this class, 1 star, and 2 really good role players in this class. And to me, that's a really good, and the star is also one of the starters, not an additional person. I think Malik Neighbors will be a star in this league. And I don't know if necessarily it's going to take that much time. I think they're getting 2 starters out of Theo Johnson. I really believe strongly in his projection, and Newbin. And I think they can get some role player potentially out of Tyrone Tracy and Andrew Phillips. I'm not sure I'm going to get starter yet out of either of those. And I think that's fair to say, even with Phillips. But a role player at running back is worth a lot if he's an explosive asset. Like, think about Antonio Gibson before he got phased out of Washington in his first year or two there. Like, he was adding explosion to that offense, and he was a big playmaker for that offense. And I think he can be like an Antonio Gibson for this Giants offense. And they need that. They don't have that with Singletary. They don't have that with Gray. They don't have it with Brightwell. And they weren't going to find it on the free agent waiver wire either, in my mind. So I like that they've added that. And again, it's not just out of the backfield. We're going to see Tracy in motion. We're going to see Tracy lined up in the slot sometimes. There's going to be interesting ways to utilize this skill set, but I see the skill set and I'm excited about it. So yeah, A- for me, B+ for Nick. These are our 30,000-foot view overview thoughts on the Giants draft. And there's a lot of tangents we got into. There's a lot of different topics that people are discussing, and I wanted to touch on all of them today. Overall, hope you're feeling good about this. And more importantly, I hope you enjoyed this content and this draft coverage, because regardless of how you feel or how the Giants end up doing, we're happy that you're here with us and you're supporting us. And we're happy that we're providing content for you that you enjoy and you want to come back to and listen to more of. So more content coming. We're going to have an NFC East grades draft review. We're going to do all three of the NFC East teams, and probably going to get some other guests on to discuss the Giants draft and the NFL draft. And then we'll think of other ways to do coverage. But I want to point one more thing out at the end of the show that we brought up a few times. But Nick has done some phenomenal film work on these guys. And not only has he done it, because we've all done it, but he's actually put it on the page. So if you go to our page right now, if you found this like organically or whatever, click our page. You can click videos and you're going to get film breakdowns of these Giants draft picks. And I know the Theo Johnson one already has over 3,000 views, and it was only released like 10 hours ago or something like that, Nick. So I know people are enjoying that one. Watch all these players for yourself. Nick is going to not only allow you to watch them on the All 22, where you get the angles that the coaches are watching, but he's giving his analysis as he's breaking it down. So you can see for yourself and make your own evaluations as far as what their projection is, what their traits are, and how that might look versus NFL level defenses or offense, depending on which player it is. So I want you to take the time to do that and enjoy that, and then see where you're at with this class too. And maybe you'll feel as confident as we do with some of these picks that, we're confident about. But once again, thank you so much for sticking with us. And we hope you have a great rest of your week. It's been a long weekend. I'm going to have a few of those. And I just shot a 99 today in golf. You know what, Nick? I'm still excited about that. I've been happy about that for like an hour and a half. Yeah. Next stop, 89. When will that happen? I don't know. But thank you again. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you soon.